Yeah.
You whenever you get it, sir.
Morning, everybody. We'll get started. My name is Michelle.
Good morning, Tino Provenzano, I'm with Mosaic and I'm industry coach here. Maybe we can go around the room today and just make sure we do it with, you want to use the phone first or in the room?
To the room.
Market Spec, Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
Hi, Bert, Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
Tampa Bay Estuary Program.
Tiffany Busby, Wildwood Consulting.
Carrie Walia, yes.
Like Simmons, Tampa Bay Estuary. Chris Brad, Environmental Protection Commission of Hillsborough County.
Tony Coronado, South Pasco County.
Ray Gribble, ESA.
Steve Payne, Geosynthetic.
Tom Janicki, ESA.
Jeremy Brown, City of Clearwater.
Ellie Jakes, City Goldsmart.
Michael Sharon, Manatee County Natural Resources.
Ellie Richmond, City of Largo.
Nick Fletcher, Tampa Electric.
Aaron DeVacco, Kendall Morgan.
Aaron Williamson, Peter Morgan. Jeff Hilton, City of Tampa.
And online, we have Elizabeth. Unmute and introduce yourself.
USF, I'm a student.
Alex.
Alex Manos, Pinellas County.
Brooke.
Brooke Driscoll, City of Largo.
Caller.
Colin Bartholomew of the City of Safety Harbor.
Felicia.
Good morning, Felicia Burks, EPA, Atlanta, Georgia.
Julie. Julie Vogel with the City of St. Petersburg. Kevin.
Good morning, Kevin Miller, City of Largo Environmental Services.
Peter.
Good morning, Peter Owens, Applied Sciences. Hope everyone's staying warm.
We just had Stacy Dane, homeowner from. Well, I think we're on our agenda. We're going to talk about the draft.
Absolutely. So as we do every time this year, we present to you all the results for the water quality assessments for the prior year. We submit this as an annual compliance assessment to both the Florida Department of Environmental Protection as well as the US EPA. So as we sort of gave you a preview at your last meeting, water quality conditions in all of the major bay segments were in the green. We did not trip any of the regulatory thresholds. And so this report, hasn't changed at all now that we've been able to not use the 5-year average information, but we've been able to plug in the preliminary data from EPC. There's a couple of things that I want to call your attention to that are different in this draft than we have in years past. In the results summary, we do highlight the key findings from from all 3 of the tasks from the Old Tampa Bay Assimilative Capacity Assessment. So that information is new to the report this year because that project was completed in 2025. And then I also just want to call your attention to sort of bring this to you all to give us your approval to submit this to EPA and DEP. But I want to remind you that at this point in time, we'll be holding this report until we get the final data from Manatee County for the lower Tampa Bay remainder portion. That usually comes in April timeframe, but we don't anticipate that anything will change materially from what is presented here. And so this just gives us the flexibility to, once those data are in, we can hit submit to and send that email out. If there are any changes, we would of course bring it back to you again, but this sort of gets this business out of the way for the year, essentially. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we're looking for a consensus approval to send this to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the US EPA once we have completed data for all of the bay segments. Thank you, Juanita. We have a second?
Second.
Stacy, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
So is basically continuation from the December 9th meeting where we reviewed some of the outcomes of the Old Tank Bay, some of the capacity assessment, as well as work through recommendation from the Old Tampa Bay working group that was developed and brought to the consortium's attention. Since that time and that direction of the consortium, we developed a decision memo based on that action at the December 9th meeting. That decision memo is distributed to the consortium in early January. I don't believe we received any comments on the language that's contained in the decision memo. Just kind of highlight real briefly what the decision memo entails. It's 4 main sections contained within the decision memo. The first section is basically background and impetus of why we went down this path and investigating alternative management approaches for the Old Tampa Bay segment because of the exceedances of chlorofluoride conditions in the 2019 to 2021 period. Following that, we kind of referenced the 3 task reports that came out of the Old Tampa Bay Summative Capacity Study that were developed over the late 2024 through mid 2025 period. The next section kind of summarizes the key points from each one of those task reports. The third section basically builds on sort of what those recommendations has brought to both the Nitrogen Management Consortium and Old Tampa Bay Working Group came to sort of fruition as a recommendation from the Old Tampa Bay Working Group. Basically that the working group is recommending that the actions identified during the 2022 to 2026 RA period, as well as those projects planned for implementation in 2027 and beyond, would be for the demonstration that we'll continue to meet water quality standards related nutrients in the Old Tampa Bay segment. And that was the formal sort of recommendation that was voted on at the December 9th meeting. And based on the discussion at the December 9th meeting, it was the request of the consortium to bring this to the attention of the department as well as the EPA to get their feedback before we fully integrate this sort of recommendation into the 2027 reasonable assurance update that is planned to be delivered to the department by the end of 2027. So we basically outlined sort of that history over the past couple of years of work we've done in Old Tampa Bay and the formal recommendation that has come out of the consortium, and then pose that question to DEP whether or not this is adequate to provide them reasonable assurance that water quality standards would be contained in the Old Tampa Bay segment in the future. So again, we want their feedback before we go down this path and kind of formalize the reasonable assurance plan and get ahead of ourselves if they don't view this as enough reasonable assurance. So we're asking them to provide comments back before the next planned consortium meeting, which would be probably towards the tail end of April. So we're requesting that the response back by April 1st. Hopefully that gives them enough time to respond to that question posed to them. Other than that, be happy to answer any questions. If there's additional language we need to tweak, I got it up on the screen. We could work through it, but it's pretty, I think, straightforward based on what the consortium developed as their recommendation at the December 9th meeting. I have to entertain any questions you guys have now. They are looking for a motion to formally send this to DEP and EPA for their comment.
No questions online.
So we need a motion to approve to submit the draft decision memo 2027-03 to FDEP and EPA.
Motion.
In a second,
Motion.
We'll need a motion.
A second.
all in favor? Sorry. Motion passes.
Thank you all. I think just sort of tee up Marcus in the next topic of discussion. We we heard some of the comments that we received at that December 9th meeting about, continue to try to understand some of the capacity of Tampa Bay. So I've actually challenged Marcus to kind of take a look and dig in and into the data a little bit more over the Christmas holidays, and he did that. So he's going to actually review some of the work that he's done and kind of highlight how it was built off some of the past analysis that we've presented, as well as maybe shed some new light on directions moving forward in that segment.
Ed ruined.
No, just kidding. I did this before Christmas, then we talked about it. Yeah, so just some context for this. I mean, as y'all know, there was a lot of work that has gone on the last year and a half, 2 years for the Old Tampa Bay Similar Capacity Project. This is really just a supplement to that. Just to look at some of the numbers that have been discussed over the last year and a half of really the similar capacity of Old Tampa Bay. And so this is me just kind of playing with data to look at the numbers in a different way, just so for some more context behind that. And also kind of looking at some of the original work that went into developing that 486 tons per year for Tampa Bay. So this is meant to just explore some of these numbers and hopefully engender some discussion and give you guys some confidence around some of the conclusions. Some capacity work as well as sort of work. So that's what I'm going to do, and this will look like a lot, right? But it's really at its core a simple model and the same thing repeated to test different assumptions that go into that model. And I'll let you guys sort of come to your own conclusions about what this is showing. So is that big enough for everybody? So this is a little webpage I put together with these analyses. You can visit it. It's linked in the agenda. You can pour through this in your own time if you want to go into details, but I'll give you the high level overview. Really, I'm trying to take this simple approach, right? The original similar capacity for Old Tampa Bay was primarily based on a linear regression, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Just reproduce that. We have more data now. We have more years of monitoring data for Old Tampa Bay that is based on top of the original data that was used to build these models back in the 90s. So I'm extending that to the present, basically. And again, I'm trying to support the work that has gone into most recent project for Old Tampa Bay, the similar capacity, as well as the historic work that Tony Screw and everybody has done. Several years ago, rather. So I just, this is a model, right, that was used to look at how chlorophyll responds to loading. And it looks complicated, but really all it is modeling chlorophyll as a function of month and loading at different lags, right? So we want to see how chlorophyll responds to loading over time and different lags. So like loading at present with chlorophyll, or loading as the sum of loading at that time plus the month prior, or 2 months prior, or 3 months prior. We can look at sort of this summation of the preceding conditions to see how that affects chlorophyll. And this is all leading up to my attempt to see how different loadings relate to chlorophyll, where we want to see what value 486 tons per year gives us for chlorophyll concentration. So the idea is that if we hold, that DMPL, we can create a light environment for seagrasses that are going to support growth. And that light environment is related to basically 8.5 micrograms per liter of chlorophyll for Old Tampa Bay. That's the relationship that was set up many years ago, and I'm just sort of challenging a hypothesis again using this new data. The first thing I did was I just recreated this old model from tech report that Tony and David Wade put together in the 90s, and I'm doing this for all bay segments first, right? Just to see really does the fit hold up compared to what was originally done
back in the 90s. And the beauty of this model is it's simple. It looks complicated with all these subscripts and whatnot, but you can test this in different ways by looking at various lags in the model of, does loading at present for chlorophyll relate to it? Or does the summation of loading at present plus previous month relate to it? Or 2 months out relate to it, and so on. So we look at different lags to see if the fit changes. And the idea being we want to have the strongest fit to explain chlorophyll. So that's really all this is doing. This is for all of the base segments combined, looking at the fit of chlorophyll to loading at different lags. So here's chlorophyll at present, so no lags. Here is 1 month plus current month, 2 months out plus 1 month out plus current month, and so on, all the way out to a 6-month lag, really just to see what that fit is. And this is a plot of the R squared values, which is the explained variance of chlorophyll for the different lags. And the original work found basically that around a 3-month lag had the strongest fit. And I'm sort of confirming that here. You can see that if you have, this scale is very small. And again, this is using data out to present that is in addition to what the historical models used. So the fit is not exactly the same. The improvement in fit with the lags is pretty minor, but we do see this similar relationship where if you add lags, in other words, if the preceding loading conditions are used to explain chlorophyll, you get improved fit. So this is, in my opinion, confirmatory with what some of the previous work was done that Tony's group had done. So this is for all base segments, and I was just sort of testing the model to see if I could just reproduce it. These R squared values are similar in range to, I think, the original model, so that was good. Then I could go ahead and just look at old Tampa Bay only. So same model, it gets a little bit simpler. I don't have terms here for separate base segments because I'm just looking at old Tampa Bay, but it's just chlorophyll. It's a function of month. There's different intercept terms for month to account for seasonality. And then we can look at the different lags and the loading just as we did before, but only for old Tampa Bay. The model and the formula notation as you would do in R. And here's the R squared values. Same relationship. You add lags to the model, you get better explained variance. Chlorophyll, not a surprise there. Again, just trying to reproduce what was. So up until this point, I'm just trying to recreate the old model using more contemporary data. But then I kind of was like, okay, well, how can I get an idea of what the assembly capacity is using this simple model? How can I develop a relationship of chlorophyll with loading to see if roughly 46 gets us at that 8.5 micrograms per liter of chlorophyll? So that's the next part. And every analysis moving forward from this is the same structure. So I'm going to explain how I did this, how I developed that relationship between the two from these models. But hopefully when it makes sense, you'll sort of get the rest of the analysis. And if it doesn't make sense, feel free to ask questions. This is sort of my, harebrained idea to how to do this, but I think it makes sense, and I hope you agree. But first thing, once I had the model, chlorophyll A for the time period I was looking at, this is just looking at that simple model of chlorophyll. That's nice. Chlorophyll versus month versus lag, TN loading. Here, for every model moving forward, I'm using a 3-month cumulative lag for loading. So at every point in time in chlorophyll, it's modeling as a function of loading at that time plus 1 month, 2 months, 3 months prior, just to be consistent with the old models. So the points here are observed chlorophyll. The lines are the predictions from the model. Fit is pretty reasonable. To develop the assembly capacity analysis that I'm doing, I'm then going to look at basically the annual averages of chlorophyll. So this is the same thing, but rather than showing it at a monthly time step, I'm looking at it each year. So again, the black points are going to be the actual chlorophyll that was measured for 2000 to present, and then the blue is going to be from the model. So it's not, a super tight fit, but it is one that is, I think, sufficient to do this analysis moving forward. Okay, so this is where my harebrained idea comes in. So from this model, I can get predicted chlorophyll. I can actually interrogate the model with different scenarios to develop a relationship of loading with chlorophyll to get this concept of decent capacity. So I'll walk you through this. I have loading, right? So this is the loading that went into the model. This is actually just observed. It is transferred to that cumulative lag when I do this analysis. But I have these scenarios where I'm basically scaling the loading back from observed at 5% intervals. So total loading that goes into it, 95% loading, 90% loading, and so on down to 5% loading. That's, you can see these lines here, what that looks like. They're kind of superimposed on one another, but it's basically a scale down of the loading from actual to 5%.
Just when you go to the annual stuff, you're not running a new regression, you're just aggregating the monthly. Okay. Yep.
So these scaled back loadings, I'm going to put into the model to see what the response is for chlorophyll. So this is just hypothetical to develop that relationship. So these scaled back loadings, I put every one of those scenarios from full loading down to 5% into the model. And this is what the chlorophyll is. You can see it's kind of this smooshed down scaling of chlorophyll, but you can see the line superimposed where like the top line is going to be the actual predicted from the model at observed conditions, and every line moving down from that is in every chlorophyll response at scale loading down to 5%, which is this line at the bottom, very sort of bottom there. Okay, is everybody with me? So then I could take this and just do the same thing and get the annual averages of chlorophyll and the total sums within a year for the loading. And that's what this is. So here's the loading from the model. This is just the input, but now we're just summing it across the months to get the annual loading that was used in the model. That's what this top one is. So these are the inputs in the model, but now just expressed as a total sum for a year for this 2024 period. And then this is the predicted chlorophyll as an average across those months for each scenario. So this top line was basically that plot that I showed you up here. So it would basically just be these points. But then these lines further down are going to be the annual average chlorophyll for those load reductions down to 5%. Okay. So I can use those annual values to create that relationship of loading to chlorophyll. How does chlorophyll respond to loading on an annual time step? And one more step here, just to show you the second to last step of how I created that, is I have basically for every year, or every scenario from 2000 to 2024, I just take the average of that. And that's what these lines are. So this is the average loading that went into the model. And this is the average chlorophyll output of that. So just taking, for every one of these lines here, just taking the average across the time series. And that's what we're looking at here. And the reason I'm telling you this is because these values are what I'm going to compare to get that estimate of similar capacity. So just this huge agglomeration of information to get that summary. So then I can plot these values against one another. So take all of the annual averages for each scenario, plot the loading against chlorophyll to get something like this. So each one of these points is going to be a value that corresponds to a line here compared to the same line here for that scenario. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to reconstruct response of loading to chlorophyll using a simple linear regression model to see what the relationship is. So each one of these points is going to be a pairwise evaluation between these two values. And then we can say, oh, look at how chlorophyll changes as a function of loading. And this dotted line here is going to be that 8.5 micrograms per liter. that we're shooting for that light environment for seagrass. And we can extrapolate out this relationship to see at what point does loading hit that line? Is it within the ballpark of 486 tons per year? Okay, and according to this simple analysis, it's roughly 466, give or take. It's not a perfect relationship, but give or take 10 tons per year or so. This is where it lands. Okay, so this, in my mind, is kind of confirmatory of 46 is generally in the ballpark, but we should be shooting for similar capacity in Old Tampa Bay. Everybody on board? It's just this relationship at the end. If you don't understand all the pieces that went into it, this is the piece that we're looking at here of, is this generally acceptable for shooting? Okay, that's the first one. Everything else is the same analysis, just repeated, but with a slightly different regression model going into it. So this first one was chlorophyll as a function of month, as a function of loading at a 3-month lag. That was the core model that Tony used way back when. Then I was just playing some games. So can I just improve that model a little bit and see what happens? The first thing I did was, okay, well, I know, chlorophyll, that's, a response variable that has sort of a logarithmic distribution. There's sort of a bunch of values close to the left side, a bunch of outliers, these extreme values, say summer or extreme years. With regression analysis, it's not uncommon to transform your variables. And in this case, this next model, I used a log transformation for chlorophyll. And I think I even did a log transformation for loading as well, because that is sort of a skewed variable as well. You can kind of see that relationship here. So like in your regression model, you're going to want to look at the residuals, see if they're normally just right. If you remember stats class back in school, that's a primary assumption is that residuals are going to have a normal distribution. That's what this plot is looking at. On the y-axis is sort of the distribution from the model, and on the x-axis is sort of a distribution from the normal distribution that you're comparing it to. And anytime you see this sort of trailing off here at the high end or at the low end even, suggests that the residuals aren't necessarily following that assumption. And we're using a model that doesn't fully capture that because we have some high values that are outliers in the model that aren't captured by that simple response. So this is the diagnostic to show me that I can use a log model here to prove that. The other thing I might do is I might include additional predictors in the models. So remember that core model was just month and loading. I can throw in other things like salinity or temperature. We know that chlorophyll responds to these. I think, the ethos of the original model was keep it simple. Let's just create a very simple model of chlorophyll versus loading. Let's not worry about anything else because, the cleaner the model, the easier it is to understand. But just for sake of argument, I wanted to see what would happen to the model if I put in these other variables like salinity and temperature. So this is a correlation matrix showing here's chlorophyll. It's sort of a mirror image of itself, but here's the distribution of chlorophyll. Here's how it relates to salinity. So the more the more fresh it gets, basically the higher the chlorophyll. Same with temperature. The warmer it gets, the higher chlorophyll we tend to see. And here's loading. So increased loading, increased chlorophyll. And then there's this is a correlation matrix. So all the things are compared to one another. Point being, I know these are things that are chlorophyll, so I want to put in the model. So then I have this new model that is the same as the original, but now I'm transforming chlorophyll in log space to better sort of describe that response. And I'm just including predictors for salinity. I also looked at whether or not these things were correlated with one another, whether the predictors were correlated. That's another assumption of regression. You don't want to have excessively correlated predictors because you have difficulty creating a good fit. Turns out they're not excessively correlated, so that assumption was fine. But again, this was the model here. log chlorophyll, adding salinity, add temperature. Did the same thing, looked at how the model fit, compared at different lags of chlorophyll. R squareds were generally in the same ballpark. I stuck with a 3-month lag as before, just to, for consistency. Then I went through the same process. So here's observed versus predicted on a monthly time step. Here's the same thing as annual averages. We see the fit looks a little bit better, but it's generally similar. Then I went through the same process of interrogating the model with different scenarios, taking the loading, scaling it back, getting predicted chlorophyll, and then relating the two to get that single response of chlorophyll versus loading. And so because this is a log model, the response of chlorophyll is not a single step at a time. It's sort of this slightly skewed. That's okay. We just get a slightly different response curve right here. But the same thing applied to this model. Chlorophyll, loading. Here's the response. We can look at where this curve hits 8.5 micrograms per liter. Drop it down to the x-axis, 439 tons per year. Very similar to the first one. The first one was 466, something like that. Generally in the ballpark of 46. So that was good. Adding more predictors didn't really make a huge difference. I just wanted to see what it did. Changing the distribution response variable did a little bit, but generally we're getting a similar answer. Okay. Last model I did was a little bit different. Pretty simple, but instead of having chlorophyll, so going back to the original model, chlorophyll, intersect terms for month, and relationship with loading. Instead of having a relationship of chlorophyll months, so seasonal relationship, I looked at how chlorophyll varied by loading as a function of year. So I had an interaction term per year. I let chlorophyll's response change differently for each year, just to see how that fit changed. Here's the R squared values with different lags, similar values here. But what's kind of cool when you do this model, you get a much better fit, I think. So here's observed versus monthly values again. Here it is average, and you see the two actually are superimposed pretty good on one another compared to the other ones, just visually. So just for sake of argument, I just wanted to see how this model fit, letting the relationship of chlorophyll with TN vary between the years. That's what that interaction term included. So going to the same exercise, interrogating the model with these different scenarios. This is the relationship that I got for this one. So the value is a little bit higher. So where this curve hit 8.5 micrograms per liter was about 527. So none of these numbers are gospel, really. It's just kind of seeing if we're in the ballpark of 46 with different models to see if we get a weight of evidence that we're generally within the ballpark of where we should be shooting for total nitrogen loading and O10. But that's good. So we got 466, 427-ish, 527, trying different things. So I think I would be comfortable saying 46 is generally something that we should be shooting for. Last thing I did was, this was all using EPC data. I did the same thing with Pinellas County data to see if I got the same relationship. So Pinellas County, as you probably know, they've been doing monitoring old Tampa Bay since I think the early 2000s. Now it's only just the west side of the bay. The sampling scheme's a little bit different. It's stratified design as opposed to fixed station EPC. But in theory, you should get a similar relationship because it's sampling the same thing, just the west side of the bay with a slightly different monitoring scheme. So I went through this same exercise, did the same model, the original one, it's chlorophyll versus month and lag load. The fit is not as tight. So here's annual averages of the model versus observed. This makes sense to me. I'm using basically half the data, only from the west side of the bay. The fit is not as good, but doing the same exercise with this first model, I got exactly the same value for where this curve it's 8.5 micrograms per liter, 466.
So the response is the whole bay. Or-
For the Pinellas data, it's just, yeah, so average across the whole bay, sorry, yeah. 466. Second model using that log response. In this example, I had to throw out salinity as predictor because it was basically drowning out the influence load, so I removed it. But this is log response with loading in temperature, so just excluding salinity. Kind of the same thing. This is where the curve hit it, 464. And then the last one, letting load, the responsive torque of the load vary between years. It's about 531. So very similar to the EPC data. And here's a table at the end that shows all of the values that I got for this. Hopefully not too confusing analysis, but EPC here, now bottom row in the different models, original, log with different predictors, and by year. So you can draw your own conclusions from this. I think this, in my opinion, is confirmatory of previous work that's been done, whether it's from the recent work with Stantec or the original that Tony's doing. Okay. So again, context. The one thing I did not do with this analysis was see if 8.5 micrograms per liter is good enough light environment. That might be the next thing to do, but I was really just seeing if 46 within that ballpark would get us to 8.5 micrograms per liter chlorophyll on an annual time scale. Too clear?
Thanks for looking at our data, and I'm glad it matched with everything. Was there in the beginning, or is there now any thought to including like confidence intervals, so you can see where the dotted line hits those confidence intervals, but that gives you quite a range.
Yeah. I'm not doing my job as a scientist by just showing these numbers. There is uncertainty around these numbers. I think the tact I was taking was, you could kind of get at uncertainty by using multiple different models here, and you could just look at what is the variation of these values in this table. But you're absolutely right. You can make this claim that, by dropping this value down to the x-axis, there's uncertainty about that. And what we're looking at here with these bands is going to be the variation of chlorophyll that's been averaged across that 2000 to 2024 period that's predicted from the model. So this is just an expression of how much chlorophyll is varied across the time period that we're looking at. And there's uncertainty in the model itself, and that's not expressed in this. I could do, repeated simulation analysis to look at, what is the variance predictions that I get from that. A lot of ways I could do it, but I just did not report that for this analysis. I can certainly do that. I think some of the modeling work that the mechanistic models, like the integrated ecosystem model or WASH models that have looked at the same thing, get very similar values. I think Ed presented some of those values at previous MC meetings. So in my mind, I could have done a better job doing the uncertainty analysis for this, but still, these values are within the ballpark. As previously shown for Tampa Bay, as well as some of the mechanistic model work that's gone into it as well. And this uses newer data as well. So,
I think the hope is that this gives you a little bit more information when you decide, because at the last meeting, it sounded like you all were considering potentially investing additional funds and doing a capacity assessment. This gives you a little bit better information to work from about whether or not that's sort of worth your time and your money. So when you all decide how you want to proceed, you can sort of keep this in your calculus.
Yep.
I think the only other thing to add, like Marcus mentioned, the original premise was to have a light environment tailored around loadings that was supportive of seagrass. So interrogating 9.5 and eventually the 9.3 regulatory threshold for Old Tampa Bay, sort of the next step based on contemporary data and whether or not there's changes or other confounding factors affecting the land environment over this contemporary period. But putting that in its place, because that's a whole separate potential change to a numeric nutrient criteria. If you accept 8.5 as sort of the premise for an appropriate light environment, I think these analysis again, I think corroborate that somewhere around 486 is probably the sweet spot to manage for loadings in Old Tampa Bay. And again, we want to be responsive to comments from last December's meeting, address any concerns from the analysis that have been built to date. That's where we're at, and we're happy to pursue sort of those other lines of questioning the criteria that have been developed, and we're just trying to get Old Tampa Bay back on track. Hopefully you're all there with us.
Well, I appreciate it. Marcus, I'm gonna collect a lot of bets now.
You should.
Unfortunately, Hans is not with us anymore, but and this is, I think, what is really important is that it's not. I was looking at the structure, the construct of the relationship with the additional data.
Yeah,
because those things are going to change, and this does a good job. More than a good job, a great job.
I'm a firm believer of keeping the most stupid. His method. I mean,
exactly.
There's a lot of ways you can slice this.
You know, back in that day, that's what we were trying to do. Is so we could get everybody on board, because that was so important, having that consensus.
Yeah.
And hopefully this helps in beating that same consensus.
Yeah, and the important thing too is looking at different approaches. Use a simple approach, this modeling approach for even more complicated.
Yeah, we can write that paper. That those three models it's incredible how close they are in their predictions. Jim Fitzpatrick, God rest his soul. He and I had started on putting something together, but we never finished it. I got to go with Gerald. So what we're talking about, I'm not sure if you guys, this regression approach, the Watts model approach that James Martin and Joe Morrison picked up on in the work on the OTB project. And it was incredible how close the relationship was between loadings and chlorophyll with three very, very different models. And you don't see too many of those places, do you?
Yeah, and Gerald has updated that model.
Yeah.
We were kind of doing that on the side throughout the similar capacity project the last 2 years. And that's available if you want to look at that. I haven't really interrogated that model extensively, but I know he's put a lot of work into updating that with new data, as has Ray with the IEM model.
Mm-hmm.
We really updated that to 2016, I think. So we were sort of, but I'm not that kind of modeler, so I'm saying someone else.
Well, I like the way it works through all the years, like, going back in the past and then, making it into a future predictor. So now you can use the information if you wanted to lower the loading somewhat, or were able to, and you would get a healthier bay.
Why not go lower than 40?
That's an important message. That's the system can respond to a reduction in loads.
Yeah.
I think that's excellent, though. I mean, Marcus, you did a great job there of opening that model up and then adding all those other predictors in there, and then the similarity is amazing.
Yeah, I agree. The EPC versus analysis comparison was amazing. I saw that. I know we were trying to leverage their data sets a lot more because they've got a great data set that we haven't looked at extensively, primarily because EPC data is used for the regulatory assessments, but it's an alternative line of information that in this case was confirmatory with the other things that I was really pleased to see. So.
Thank you, Marcus. Next, we have the general admin with the ultimate break for more conference.
I think this will build off this last conversation. This team received a restore grant from the DEP to look at additional tools for Old Tampa Bay. Originally, sort of that grant was tailored around trying to achieve a 25% reduction in stormwater loading that were estimated from the Old Tampa Bay integrated ecosystem model back in the mid 2010 period. And that roughly translated to about a 90-ton reduction in observed loads over that time period versus what we were actually experiencing. So we're trying to find sort of these load reduction benefits, large projects and watershed. And we're going to bid for some of that work, and Con's going to explain some of the first steps of building that information to identify these new stormwater control basins.
Thank you, Ed. Everybody hear me okay? Can't gauge the sound sometimes. All right. Thank you. Glad to be here and to talk about the Stormwater Controls Identification Implementation Project. As Ed mentioned, my name is Con Bupa with Jones Edmonds. I'm the project manager. Really appreciative of your participation from the municipal partners here and regional agencies and counties. We really need your help. What I'm going to do here is talk about the scope of the project, our findings to date, and more importantly, we want to hear from you what your local needs may be, some project opportunities, and sites. With me here today is all right. With me here today is Brett Cunningham, who will be leading up the QA/QC. He's done many projects of this nature across the state. Many of you know already Tony Janicki and Ray Pribble have done extensive work in Old Tampa Bay here. We also have Tiffany Busby from Wildwood Consulting to help us with outreach, and Steve Bean from Geosyntec, who's going to help us identify and develop these project concepts. Now, this is going to be a collaborative effort. We're here to talk about the project scope, but we're also want your input because these are projects that are going to be done in your neighborhoods. We want to receive input on potential project sites. We have some regional scale project that we will have planned, and we will make sure that we align with your goals as well. I want to mention that this is a restore funded priority that was awarded to the Tampa Bay Estuary Program through the Department of Environmental Protection. We want to take this opportunity to thank those agencies and our partners for enabling this important regional effort to protect Old Tampa Bay. Wow. So project goal, we want to restore and protect water quality in Old Tampa Bay. And what we're going to do is identify those potential nitrogen load reduction opportunities. In the end, we want a list of regional scale projects that some of which will eventually go to conceptual design, and some of those will eventually be fit as well. So that is our goal here today. A little bit about the watershed. It's a little over 300 square miles, encompassing Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, and a little bit of Pasco County as well. Cities of Tampa, Clearwater, Oldsmar, Largo, St. Petersburg. So highly urbanized areas. But we all know that watersheds, they don't follow city or county boundaries. So regional coordination is going to be essential in order to develop meaningful nitrogen loads. And that's an important reason why we're here today. So the overarching goal is to reduce nitrogen loads by 180,000 pounds per year. This aligns well with the 90 tons reduction needs that were identified in previous Old Tampa Bay assessments, and also moves us closer to the federally recognized TMDL target of 486 tons per year. We're currently in phase 1, which includes the conceptual planning and design, but it also will eventually lead to phase 2 and 3, which is final design and permitting, and eventually some of these projects will be going to implementation. Wow. So now that we've talked about the goals and the nitrogen loading targets that we're aiming for, next obvious question is how are we going to get there? We need large reductions. What this slide shows is why we're emphasizing regional scale projects. Looking at the local level, a lot of these projects, they can reduce tens of pounds of nitrogen per year, but at a cost of thousands of dollars per pound. And when you go to a neighborhood level, a little bigger ponds and such, you can have hundreds of pounds per year, a little better. But take a look at the regional. When we're having regional scale projects treating thousands of pounds, thousands of acres, we can remove nitrogen at a much more cost-effective manner than, say, from smaller disconnected projects. So really those regional scale projects with multiple benefits. Also, in addition to the economies of scale, it really provides opportunities for innovation. And with these large projects, it lends itself better to have better access to grant funding from regional, state, and federal grant funding agencies. So we're currently in phase 1. So I'll talk about what we're doing right now, what we've done so far. That includes the major task of the surface water resource assessment. Eventually, we'll develop a project inventory, identify projects that are going on now, develop concepts to help align with the goals of this program, and also engage public. The first step is the surface water resource assessment. This is where we use the best available data to identify hotspots to develop these concepts. It's going to involve a lot of, or what we've been doing is compiling a lot of data from you all, the counties, the agencies, the DOT and such, and we're evaluating, all kinds of watershed information, water quality data, loading analysis that were previously done. We're taking all of this. We did do a trends analysis, updated trends analysis using the seasonal Kendall-Tall methodology to detect long-term changes, as well as, comparing these results to management targets. We've identified the impaired waters and TMDL goals so that we are aligning with those goals as well. We've also updated the pollutant load model to 2025, something that really need to know where the sources of pollutions are coming from so that we can identify the optimal locations and best projects for those types of issues. And in the end, we're really looking to develop hotspot subbasins, basins that are contributing the largest nitrogen loads so that we can more efficiently tackle these projects. The first step is in the surface water resource assessment is data compilation. We've compiled a lot of data to paint a complete picture of what's going on in Old Tampa Bay. These includes looking at previous studies and watershed management plans, for example, to gauge where the water quality issues are, the flooding issues are, and more importantly, a lot of this comes with valuable GIS data, and we've got a lot of those. We've been collecting the water quality data, including from the long-term monitoring stations, to be able to update our analyses. For example, the trends analysis that I talked about. We've updated the pollutant loading model. One of the things that first steps, of course, is to look at where we can feasibly implement projects. So one of the things we're looking at is where are there available lands, publicly owned lands. And that's important because, number one, land acquisition is usually one of the biggest hurdles. So we've downloaded the data from the various property appraisers databases, as well as SwiftMud. One of the things that we're looking for, easements, conservation lands, and other areas of opportunities that we can do projects in. Now, with that said, I know that this data probably may not be complete, and this is where we want to ask you to really, in your jurisdictions, in your areas, find out some of those candidate parcels that we may not be aware of, that are be able to implement some of these projects. So I know some of you have planned projects. We'd like to know about those and capture that information as well. Now, having determined where we can feasibly do projects, on the one hand, is what we need to do. On the other hand, we really need to look at the hydraulics. How is water moving through the system? How is runoff generated and being routed? So now we're looking at the stormwater network, and we compile this information from the stormwater inventories from the various counties and cities. So we've contacted you guys for the latest, greatest stormwater inventory. We have that information. We're also looking at the previous watershed management plans to see, because they tell us a lot about how water is being driven. And what we want to do is understand this dynamic so that we can capture the most amount of flow to be treated. It's an essential step, really, because we want to maximize the capture as well as the treatment efficiency. This is a really critical step, but we've got a lot of great information. We're looking through that right now and have some great ideas as well. As far as, having that stormwater network, we also look at, and this, what you see here is an overlay of the FEMA flood hazard areas with the community floodplains. And what we want to do here is when we are generating, developing these concepts, we want to also look at opportunities where we can not just improve water quality, but where are those flooding issues that we can have multiple benefits from as well. There's going to be opportunities for floodplain reconnection, for example, wetland restoration, those types of opportunities. But we need to really look at it from a holistic perspective. And we've got a lot of great information for that as well. And from there, we've got the information of where the water is going and how it's moving and all the dynamics. The other side of it is now the water quality evaluation, what's actually in the water, so that we can come up with projects that have the biggest improvement for the bang in buck. So we're based on some of these drivers.
Yeah, jump in here. This piece, I'm Ray Tribble with ESA. Part of the surface water resource assessment is to look at what's been listed as impaired in the water body, or in the watershed, which WIBIDs have been identified by DEP as not meeting their designated uses. And there are a few, notably along the northwestern side of that whole long branch up through Mullet and Bishop Creeks areas that have been listed as impaired, primarily for nutrients. Normally it's nitrogen. There are a couple of phosphorus listings there. And in addition to those, on that left-hand figure that on the west coast of Old Tampa Bay, there are some EPA TMDLs that were promulgated that include along the northeastern side too, through the Double Branch and Sweetwater and Rocky Creek areas, in addition to those ones down in the corner there associated with the central portions of the whole Tampa Bay on the west coast. I mentioned part of this was trend analysis. We took for this initial effort, we looked at the watershed only. We will still be doing trend analysis in Old Tampa Bay itself, based on the long-term water quality data we have there from EPC and the stuff from Pinellas County since around 2000. But in the watershed itself, the locations where we actually have enough data to do trends, work this by the smallest, most resolved sub-basin that we had that were developed back in the early mid-90s to do the SBH program loading model. You've all seen the result of these models for years, but these outlines are the smallest areas that we have, those sub-basins. And the black dots and incentives on these subbasins show where we don't have enough data to actually do a trend, but every other subbasin we did. These are the results for total nitrogen. And it turns out there's really only one subbasin where there exists enough data in the watershed associated with the Lake Tarpon Canal, actually, where nitrogen PN is increasing. A very similar graphic like this for TP we have available, but that shows that TP is only increasing in the watershed in Long Branch, down in that lower left between Black Feather Sound. So those are the results of the watershed trends analysis. As I mentioned, we'll in the water body too to see if we can relate some of the things we find out related to both these trends and our loadings, which I'll show in a minute, and what trends we might see in Old Tampa Bay itself. Part of the water research assessment was to compare what's been going on with our management target. We have all seen the seagrass time series for Old Tampa Bay, and now it's dropped off since the peak in 2016. On the right here, these two color columns, you've all seen these before too, more than likely, but so there's no confusion. The one on the left is the one we came up with for the national program developed back in the mid-90s, late 90s, to evaluate light and chlorophyll target attainments. That's the decision matrix results from way back then have been applied all the way back through beginning of when EPC started monitoring data throughout Tampa Bay. So for Old Tampa Bay, that left column, colored column, showed us what we've been finding out from our comparison of light and chlorophyll to our Old Tampa Bay targets. That's not regulatory. That's something the SRA program Consortium used to help guide our efforts in response to our findings. The right column, the right red and green only list is results in relation to DEP's chlorophyll threshold for Old Tampa Bay, and that's either we're making it or we're not. That's when we report to DEP on every 5-year RA update period, and keep track of year to year as soon as we get the data in. And now it's as soon as market gets data in, we no longer have to do that. So those are the parts of the surface water resource assessment we're dealing with actually observed water quality. And then we wanted to look at this part of guidance for our hotspot analysis. Look at where the loads, the nitrogen loads in this case, are actually coming from those subbasins. These are two different views of the unit aerial nitrogen load, and this is pounds per acre. The figure on the left is an average over the last 15 years, for which we have data 10 through 2010 to 2024. And on the right is the median. There's really not a lot of difference between the mean and the median of these, but we're seeing the highest unit aerial loads coming from that arc along the west coast from Long Branch up through Mullet and Bishop Creeks, and then along that eastern side from the Sweetwater, Rocky Creek, Channel G, that type of those locations. So this will help us put this in the hopper in addition with the other information that Con has showed us in relation to flooding, hydraulic within the watershed, to help us pick out where we might get the most benefits from implementing single or multiple series of projects for load reduction. And we can tie these, run back, and we can help to tie these in with our TMDLs perhaps, and where folks actually have responsibility for reducing loads and improving water quality that way. That maybe check multiple boxes for assisting entities and reducing loads at the same time. And that also tie in with where do we see our difficult results from trends testing, increasing nitrogen concentrations in the watershed, or phosphorus concentrations. That will be how we can put all this information we get from our surface water resources assessment, help guide us through this next portion of where we end up doing potentially projects. Steve, are you up next? Bring this one.
Yes.
Okay. You've been up here since. Okay, Robert.
It's been a while.
Years.
So, what I'm going to be talking about, so we have the first thing that Con and Ray have talked about, and that's basically identifying, kind of setting the plane for what's going, looking at the water quality trends, looking at things, looking at areas that might go to target. That was, if we think about it in a time frame sense, that's the sort of first 6 months of our project work, doing that, basically getting that surface water assessment. I'd say so. The next thing I'm going to talk about is something we're just kicking off now, which is this will be the next year components of the project. And that is basically the project inventory. The ultimate goal here is we're going to be coming up with a set of projects that can be then taken further, and that's the ultimate goal. What I'm going to do today is kind of walk you through each of the steps that we're going to be doing, sort of talking about, how this is going to proceed, and give you an idea of when, how we're coordination, things like that. So I'm going to walk through kind of 4 primary areas here to talk about. The first is what we'll call kind of, again, sort of setting the playing field. It's project inventory development. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here. That's the idea. And we don't want to overlap where other things are going on. We want to be very aware of the activities that are going on for basically load reduction, also understanding the activities that occurred in the past for load reduction, and basically developing an idea of what is going on throughout the watershed, and then helps us then look to target routes. So it's kind of that first phase, and this will be a lot of reach out going on. I think we've already had some reach outs and spoken to some folks, and that will continue in this first part, kind of trying to develop that full inventory of what's going on and understanding. At the same time, Con talked about some of the different GIS data and other things that'll become part of our framework for this, the available lands, infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure, all these things that play into developing those projects. So this first part, we'll call it, you're setting playing field. We're trying to get a good, complete understanding of where road reduction work is headed in the past, where it's looking, where projects are recently completed, and then where they're going in the future. And of course, the action plan database will be a big component of that. We're kind of going through it and then trying to see what we got in our hopper. So that's the first part. The second part is kind of where you talk about outreach and data collection. Now we're going out and saying, all right, we want to find focus areas. Okay, where are we going to focus our efforts from that? And that's going to be fed by what we're seeing in the surface water assessment, but it's also going to be fed by what we're learning about where the projects are, where activities are, and where individual jurisdictions may be targeting something or are aware, hey, this is an opportunity that we've been thinking about and we want to go after. So part of our coming to these meetings and our reaching out is to get that kind of feedback. And so we're reaching out to the meetings, but we'll also be reaching out kind of one-on-one to the different jurisdictions as we go through this process. So you think about that second phase, it's now, all right, we're starting to take this watershed, we're starting to narrow our way down to places that we want to target because we're seeing this hotspots for loads in terms of pounds per acre, opportunities, because there are opportunities, to get a greater volume when we start talking about these regional projects. There are certain needs to feed a regional project. And so, those things will help us create focus area where we want to look to do, kind of putting all those things on top of each other to get to that. So that's that next phase in doing that. All right. Then once we kind of got our sort of target areas, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start developing project concepts. And the first thing we're going to have an initial list of project concepts that we'll develop from that coordination through this year-long effort that we're doing. We'll take those things and we'll start to screen them. And so what we're going to be doing is develop criteria.
What are those criteria going to entail? Well, of course, the most primary aspect of that will be what is the load reduction? What is the water quality load reduction benefit that we're going to get out of that? Well, there are other criteria in there too. Permittability. You look at addressing also potential TNDLs in the watershed where you can get dual benefits there. Available lands and ability to do these things. All of these things will feed into criteria for the feasibility and basically create a ranking. And from the ranking, we'll then kind of take that initial list, which may be, X number long. I don't know what that number is at the moment, but X number of potential projects long. And then we start to filter that down basically till we get to, a top target list. And then now we've got the top target list. We take that top target list, and now we're going to go in and start to, really get into developing concept plan. We'll develop the concept plans. We'll be doing engineering opinions and probable costs for those projects. Now, identifying and kind of providing an overview of profitability. What are the hurdles? What are the problems with projects? And so we'll take those top tiers and kind of come those, and then from those, eventually, certain projects will get selected out and then become ones to target for implementation. So the idea is, what I was trying to do here is kind of carry you through what this next year of the project will be. So this is the say we're at the 6 month point, the 6 month to the 18-month component of the project. That's what we're going to be doing here. It'll include a lot of reach out from starting here today. Do that. All right, who's next? Oh, sorry, I missed one slide in there. I jumped in.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tiffany. My role is to help with the stakeholder engagement of this project. And really there's, in my mind, two major parts of the engagement. The first one is really more targeted at folks like you. So as everyone has mentioned previously, we're using your data, we're using your project lists, and we're hoping to use some of the analysis that's going on, like Ray presented with the initial hotspot analysis, to also help all of us decide where we might need to identify additional projects or sites that we could use for to really get to that large load reduction that we need. So we have stakeholder coordination with you all and those reach outs for data, for project information, for your future plan, and just also local knowledge. So if you have thoughts on spots that might be problematic in terms of loading, you feel like, there's also a site that we might be able to use or a spot that it would give us a lot of load reduction, we'd really like to hear that from you. But then also we have the public involvement part. So as we get further down into the phases where we're actually have identified some projects that we want to pursue and have conceptual designs about, we also want to have some sessions to inform those neighborhoods about those projects, why they're being pursued, and the need for them, give them a chance to ask questions and provide information about those projects. So hopefully, particularly if those projects are in your jurisdiction, that helps you also so that your local residents are aware of these projects and what the plans are. So we'll be involved throughout the process to help with that step as well. So in terms of timeline, as we went through early on with Con, that the water resource assessment task, the first step, is nearly complete. We're wrapping up a few things on that, but the first 6 months of the project will really focus on doing that baseline information gathering. And so now we're at the beginning of task 2, the project inventory, and you can tell by Steve's map up there with all the dots on it. Our team members have done a lot of work over time with many of you. So we're using the existing information that our folks have in-house, and that's kind of what Steve was showing, but we know that that's incomplete and we want to build that information. So for the first 18 months, that's where our real focus is going to be. So please, if our team members reach out to you, please, get back to them so we can make sure to have those discussions with you and find out, what you know, or maybe even what you don't know too, and kind of have that exchange so that we have the benefit of your local knowledge and experience. And then task 3 will be that is stakeholder engagement. So let's say that kind of runs throughout the project, because the initial part with identifying the project sites is really about using your local knowledge and history programs information to kind of build what are our most optimal sites and options. And then the second part of it, when we actually pick the projects, is more outward facing, with engaging the neighborhoods that will be affected by the projects. So that's our timeline. So this is really the end of the information that we have that we wanted to present to you. So at this point, we wanted to pause, and the first question we have back to you all, and including those folks that are online, is do you have any questions about project scope or any of the information about what we're up to with this project so far? Any questions?
Just wanted to add, I think folks that are on the management board maybe realize this, but just so that it's clear, this is not just like an assessment and concept phase. There's a whole second phase of funding that will be available to support permitting and construction for at least one project. We hope closer to 3. So this is going to result in a project on the ground in the watershed. And so your help making sure that it's one that, supports your needs as a community and water quality in Old Tampa Bay will be really critical.
Comment, or maybe for Ray, on the long-term trends. So we've started looking both at that record and just a 10-year, and it's different. So Mullet Creek and Allen's Creek both popped up as significantly increasing when you look at the 10-year.
We can do the same thing. That'd be helpful. Be helpful to us, probably. Yeah, we'll get the data. We can pop that through. Thank you.
Stacy, is that on the water quality dashboard?
Yeah.
Great. Other questions? And Juanita, I don't know if you noticed, but there is a little bit of Pasco County in that upper part of the watershed. So I don't know, what
exactly which part is it? Do you know which watershed is that middle section in?
You can go back to the map. One of those maps on that.
Yeah.
Cypress Creek or River?
No, it's not Cypress Creek. I think it's like around
Southwood?
I think it's west of 41.
West of 41. Yeah.
Like that little sliver at I think Jonah is aware of it too. Kind of talked about Ethan. I think there was a project that did fire and that's come down.
And we realize that it is a watershed boundary. Some of your jurisdictions, the area that it's in may be small but we want to make sure we're exploring all those spots. I think the hotspot analysis was kind of a medium level voting area, but we still want to make sure that we're pursuing those project opportunities if there's something there, especially since it's so high up in the watershed, because that would benefit, all the way down if there was a spot there. So whether you're small or big, we still want to, get your input on it. But we don't know if, there might be a spot there or not. Yeah.
Are you meeting with jurisdictions? Is that your plan? Okay.
Yes.
And I put you on the spot right now, but I put my email at the end there. So if you have any information, you can send it to me, but we will be reaching out to you.
Good question.
Yeah, Jeremy Brown with Clearwater. Sarah, you could probably answer this, maybe I'll get with you after, but I just look at the map up there and maybe my eyes are bad, but all I just saw was a bunch of dots everywhere except around Clearwater. I tried to load the presentation, but couldn't access it. So I'm not sure if there's a reason for the lack of dots in the Clearwater area. But then the other thing I thought was interesting was the part about Lake Tarpon Canal kind of having some challenges right now. It would seem like maybe that's a pretty decent area to look for to try to help the overall water quality. Just a comment, I guess.
I can answer on the dots. So I know that in some of we keeps kind of showing various databases.
Yeah.
I think the Hillsborough side had also the CIP data sets in there, so that had some extra stuff on the Hillsborough side. And the other one had the, like the action plan database stuff. There's also a lot of action plan database projects that don't have locations, so they're not necessarily shown by location yet. So that's probably why you saw a lot more dots on the one side than the other. There's also CIP data included with some of that just in the coverage that Congress showing there.
And you have the stormwater network as well from Alligator Creek forecast.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, Sarah can probably speak to them more so than I can, but I do know we have a couple of projects that we're aiming for on that side of the city.
There's a long history trying to get that action plan database up to speed.
Okay. Maybe we can.
This will help a lot.
And this process which we just started basically, this in gathering that project information, the best sources of information are going to be when we get a chance to sit down, talk virtually or live, kind of, what have you got kind of thing, and those reach outs will be happening.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
And I know some communities right now, Pinellas County, for example, they're in the process of updating the action plan database. But if you can send us ahead, especially the regional scale type projects or the big projects, that's what we're looking for. So if you know that ahead of time, we'd be happy to get that information and help you put in the action project database. But yeah, I know some of you are in the process of doing that type of stuff.
And, I think we need to get in touch with DEP because we found out that they've been doing some work in the Tampa Bay watershed that we weren't aware of, and make sure that we take that into account.
Okay, good. Other questions about the scope?
Just for expectation setting for the room, we'll probably move to having these conversations as sort of Old Tampa Bay working group and not at the full consortium until we get to the point where we're actually like at a specific project level that might have a larger consequence for the group. So this introduction was so everybody can know, but we'll move these to working group discussions over the course of this year.
I think as a team, we're expecting to come back and schedule something with the Old Tampa Bay working group when we get to the part where we're going to develop criteria for how to pick the projects from the list that we develop. And so we'll formulate those criteria with the input of the group before we actually start talking about the projects themselves. So we'll bring that back to the Old Tampa Bay working group for their input. So those of you that might be active in that, we'll be back. Time 26 to talk about that.
As part of the last phase, when you're talking about construction and everything, is looking for funding for some of those projects that might not be funded by the estuary. Like, are you looking at different funding sources that might be available for some of those other projects?
We will look, I mean, there's some funds allocated already, but we don't have the funding yet, so until we do that cost estimate.
And I think, and hopefully there are synergies with the Tampa Bay Coastal Master Plan development. So those projects that we are not able to pursue with the restore funding, they would still make it into a list that be attractive to the Coastal Master Plan or other revenue sources that might, fully implement those remaining projects. So this is like the first step to create the menu, and then we gotta, tick off the menu as we go as fun.
So the next question, and like I say, we'll reach out to one-on-one, talk about this too, but are there any project sites or input that you'd like to share with the group today that immediately leap to mind, especially as you saw like the Grady's hotspot analysis and the loading maps? I think we're interested in both big and small, parcels. So I mean, a giant parcel that we could build a huge thing on would be great. But small sites might also work depending on where they are and what the loading can be treated at that site is. So we're willing to consider many different kinds of sites to try to figure out how we get the overall effect. Are there any sites that leap to mind to anybody here today?
Porter has several projects that it's looking at. So just
a meeting and we can go through a lot of things that are near future and future. David?
Oh, yeah, and Colin, Steve, I can't remember if I've talked about this or you may already know, but one of the higher loading areas in or Hillsborough County was that Town and Country area. That's at Sweetwater Creek and Clark Creek. So the county has an ongoing Town and Country drainage improvement project, which is not a large parcel, but it's a relatively large scale project throughout that area that has a lot of different, like, smaller segments to it that will connect. And so that's currently going through, I think it's going to Biddeford side. The main focus is flood reduction, but they're also trying to incorporate water quality improvements, green infrastructure throughout the whole linear segment of the project. But there's not one big land area.
Right. Well, I do, yeah, I think we are gonna have to think creatively so that we, look for those best opportunities.
I was gonna ask Dave, I know we've been contacted by a couple citizens in the Double Branch area. Are there any project concepts in Hillsborough County being contemplated in Double Branch?
Can't think of one that's currently in development. The Walmart engineering group been looking at that area because there's a flood issues.
Yeah.
There. And I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity for water quality improvement projects there too. I'm not sure of I don't know of any large land areas that county currently owns that are like PLAT or other government owned.
That's something we'll be looking at. I have all the network and flooding information. Actually looked at that a few years back. I think I know most of the areas that flooding issues there from that.
The horse race are up there too.
Yeah, there's a horse race. There's a private horse race. Way up there. There's a ranch as well.
And then, Con, have you already been in touch with somebody from Pinellas County Stormwater about the project?
I talked to Melanie, mentioned that they were or all.
Okay. We have Cross Bayous, many phased projects. And then Alligator Creek is actually, we did just find out that a TMDL is underway for the lake. So that's, right on Old Tampa Bay, kind of in the armpit hotspot area. But I'll get more information from her.
And we have been looking at as well. Just sifting through the plans that are available for our spots and
One thing just to kind of mention to the group, I always recall Dan Bennett bringing up for City Clearwater, for City of Oldsmar. You're talking about big volume of water. If we want to achieve a significant load reduction to store and potentially treat. So when we're talking about scale, thinking about it from both sort of a flooding and water quality benefit perspective for your municipalities is important, because we're going to have to target areas that have huge volumes of water coming through the watersheds. There's probably a couple that we know are sort of aligned to those hotspot maps. And that's really, bolstering any projects that you guys might be thinking about in those areas, and making them not only a flood protection benefit for the communities, but also sort of these added value projects for water quality improvements as much as possible. That's what we're trying to achieve through these sort of regional scale visioning process and project selection. So that's where we really could use your guys' help, of where these additional funds could, bolster the work that you're already trying to do to reduce flooding impacts for these communities. while also achieving this goal of improving downstream water quality in Old Tampa Bay. So kind of put that sort of in your frame of mind as we kind of reach out to each of the municipalities. But you know, that's the whole impetus of this project, is those water quality co-benefits of treating large volumes of water originating from water sources in the watershed.
Yeah, and to that last question, you have projects that are already part of your CIP or thoughts. Maybe they're not in your CIP yet, but ideas for regional projects. We'd really like to hear them. Our team brings some experience from regional projects from other parts of the area and the state. So we're going to bring those ideas as well. But if you have suggestions or ideas, when we do that outreach too, we'd like to talk through those and make sure that those, you know, get considered as we go forward. So, don't be bashful about sharing, even if it isn't already right. It doesn't have to be on the list just yet. Okay. All right. Are there any other suggestions you might have for our team as we move forward?
I had a quick comment. Pete Owens here. As you all know, SwiftMud's water quality rules changed, in July, the bill last year, and were being implemented, I guess, starting December last year. So every project that goes through the books now is going to have more intense water quality standards put on it than there were before, somewhat.
There's a new state water rule. Also,
yes, yeah, DEP actually implemented it. I mean, has it on the books, but that in itself, it's going to make projects cost more probably. But again, if it's going to help water quality, that I see that as a sort of a good meld with what's going on.
Well, that's a good thought. Thank you for reminding us about the additional rules. Hopefully, if it's a restoration project, that'll make that part of the permit a little bit easier. But the new rules are something that I'll have to learn along the way. So thank you for that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give you the open discussion, key database, project entries, transfer requests.
I have a few things listed on here, and then this is also just sort of like the open forum time for you all to bring, any issues or items that you think need to call to the attention of the consortium. The main things that I want to do is to show you all what the action plan database looks like, how you can start to enter your projects in there. Thank you to Largo and Pinellas. I've seen you in there adding projects. There's probably a few kinks that we need to work through. If you can make sure you contact me directly if you haven't heard back or you're not seeing approvals or something's not working for you. When I see stuff going in there, if there's anything that is catching my attention, I'm trying to reach out and figure it out as quickly as possible. But just reminding you all that, these projects is the primary way the DEP is assessing whether or not we're making progress to attain water quality standards in Tampa Bay as a whole. And so we're relying on you all getting these projects into the new action plan database. So it's going to look a little different. So you might want to leave yourselves a little time. We are in the last year of the 5-year RA assessment period. And so we're asking you all to be working towards getting your project entries in as quickly as you can. So if you can get them in from 2022 to 2025 in the first half of this year, we would appreciate it. And then by the end of the year or very early into 2027, if you can get those 26 projects in, that will set us up nicely to being able to put together the full reasonable assurance plan update for you all. Yeah.
I know Pinellas, you're having issues accessing that because it was a firewall issue.
Yeah, we got it, but we had to get permission.
Okay. Yeah, that's an issue unrelated to us, but if anybody has issues accessing it, let myself or Maya know.
Yeah, so again, the action plan database looks different than it has in years past. Hopefully it is easier. I think it is easier. But it will look different. So there's always a learning curve with things like that. The action plan database, that new interface, also allows you not just to enter projects, but also to record any transfers or transfer requests. We know that there have been some of those that have been called to the consortium's attention, potentially over this 5-year period, particularly in the Hillsborough Bay segment. So just to be aware, if you have executed a temporary or permanent transfer request between your entity and another, if you can help us keep track of it in the action plan database, that's very useful for us in some of the tables that we're reporting to the department on your behalf. For point source entities in particular, this is your reminder that the faster you get us your loading data, the faster we can assemble the 2025 loading estimates. Our goal is to turn that around as quickly as possible so you have the best information to make resource management decisions off of, and it also makes the full RA update plan quicker and easier for us to assemble. So please, there's a form on tbep.org on the consortium page that you can use to submit that information. You can go through Ray, you can go through Marcus. We're working together to generate these data as quickly as possible. So please get that information to us. In terms of like the next year worth of work, I just kind of want to sort of set expectations and hear from you all. I want to let you know where the program's thinking as the facilitator and convener of this group. We've met a lot over the past couple of years. I'm not certain we need to meet at that same level of frequency. I'd like to be looking towards rolling the cadence back to maybe like a 2 meetings per year or 3 meetings per year, unless something critical is coming up. We know we'll have some working group meetings. So rather than kind of getting you all together in the room, we know that the Old Tampa Bay Stormwater Controls Project is going to need some attention from the Old Tampa Bay participants. This is the year that we're going to be standing up the atmospheric deposition monitoring station working group. So I know some of you have explicit interest in helping with that. So I think those 2 things will take up our staff resources in terms of convening more regular meetings. So I think expect for the consortium as a whole to be meeting at that less frequent cadence, unless you all are bringing things explicitly to our attention. I'm then sort of thinking about putting together that 5-year reasonable assurance plan. You know, there's a number of outstanding issues that we've sort of talked about for the last RA period, for this RA period. Some of them have sort of been bleeding into these conversations, but it hasn't really felt, and this is, you know, me sort of asking you or reflecting if my perception is accurate, that some of these big issues related to sort of land use change and how that might affect your loading allocations, maybe there's not really an appetite in the room to tackle those more sort of thorny issues in this RA period. So we sort of have a list of some of these outstanding issues that the consortium might need to address. But right now, as the convener and facilitator, I'm sort of thinking that we hold on to those issues for the 2027 RA update. And we focus really on the pitch that we've made to DEP and EPA to focus on doing additional projects to demonstrate load reductions in the Old Tampa Bay assimilative capacity work. So we're going to report on all the things that we've done over that time period. And then we know that some of the allocation issues do need to be updated prior to this submitting this RA plan update, particularly with respect to things like Piney Point, where we know there's an interim allocation, there's a permit, we know that that's going to be revised. So there's a few of these allocation questions that some of you have come to us one-on-one and sort of talked about, but we think that there's a little bit of work to do in sort of refining some of the voluntary changes to the allocation tables. So that's really, we're kind of proposing to keep this as like a fairly simple, bare bones, you know, tried and true approach to the RA update. And hopefully we can crank that out pretty early in 2027. And then we can look at sort of how we want to target our efforts for the subsequent RA period, maybe focus on some of these more complex, thornier issues at that time. So that's sort of my proposal to you all and what I'm thinking about. I would also sort of, for expectation setting, we've talked a lot about Old Tampa Bay over the past few years. And I would really like these full consortium meetings to, you know, be relevant, salient to those of you in Middle Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, and Lower Tampa Bay. So I'm sort of relying on you all to come to us and sort of let us know if there's particular issues that you would like us to present on, talk about, work through. So please share those future meeting topics, with us so that we can make sure that, we're not just hyper focusing on one part of the Bay. We know that every part of the Bay is special and has its own challenges. And so to the extent that it's relevant to your work here at the consortium, we want to make sure we continue to address those things. So sort of how I'm seeing this year and the RA update and sort of the next 5-year RA update, I'm wanting sort of vibe check, temperature check, if that sort of meets your expectations or if you see things differently. But that's sort of where we're at.
Does anyone have any concerns about that proposal?
No, I just want to add something else before we leave, because if you're well aware, the legislature is in session. There's 2 bills out there. They're going to affect almost everybody in this room. And that's reducing the ability of local governments to do environmental programs. So be well aware of that. It hasn't had legs like it has this year. So, keep in touch with your people up in Tallahassee.
That's been proposed for the past 2 years.
Yes.
And it died. So that I'm hopeful it will do the same. It's really being pushed by one particular. And I talked with him and he was fine.
Sarah.
I think it's a non-issue, but if you can just keep us aware if anything happens with the police court suggestion. I mean, the only thing I hear is like the 2 sentences on the radio. So if anything moves forward beyond that, I think that's obviously.
Is that a consortium request or broader, like Tampa Bay Estuary Program request?
Oh, not sure. Probably.
So for the, I think for our work, I'm not quite sure that, what has been sort of, I'll only use the word floated because it hasn't actually even been proposed at this point in time. I'm not sure how salient it is to the consortium itself. But for the estuary program at the management board and through, those channels, we are working on putting together a sort of fact sheet about sort of the basic environmental and water quality resources out in that area. But like I said, at this point in time, it is really, all it is a website and an op-ed in a newspaper. It hasn't, there's been a request for a pre-application discussion on the land use hearing. There's no actual plans or proposals, no permits submitted. There's nothing to react to yet. Right. Yeah.
I have a question about the action plan database stuff again. So in the past, I think there were some things that were reported on that I can't see what used to be there so well, but I know like some of it's like educational outreach stuff. It doesn't actually have like a load estimate. Do you still want those things reported? Outreach programs?
So there's 3 main tables that we submitted as part of the regional plan. First is those projects over the current implementation period. So those would be projects that you've completed during 2022 to 2026. There's a second set of tables that we've accumulated through all the entries in the action plan database that are ongoing projects. So if there are continuing education projects that there could be a load reduction benefit from, even though they're not calculated, we're still carrying those forward in those tables in the regional assurance plan. And then the third table is sort of the planned projects in the foreseeable future. So 10, 15 years out, we want those project concepts inputted into the action plan database as well. We'll give hopefully the department the full breadth of activities that each of the members are doing. So again, any projects over the current implementation period, ongoing projects and legacy projects that might have been entered in the past, and any updates to those. If you do have new loading information on the project, we want those updates in the database. And then those sort of future conceptual projects that are not yet implemented, but hopefully at plans to implement in the future.
But the education program is one that has been ongoing for quite some time, and it has previously been reported in the action plan database. There's no need to import that information again. We will carry that forward. We have sort of all the entries available to us. We don't need you to duplicate that effort. Does that?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
But if you do like a new education or outreach project that you think has a benefit for, you know, the loading kinds of conditions and water quality, please do add that in there, even if you don't have an estimated load reduction associated with it. And I know I have like an email from you about some of these things, but I'll say some of it like just to the room. I know it's a pain in the butt to get the cost estimates, but it really does help tell the story. So it's worth the extra effort. If you need to put in an entry and leave the cost estimate available or blank until you are able to get that information from someone else on your crew and then update that entry, do it that way so that we can sort of have a placeholder for it. But it is much better to not leave that information blank. And the same thing, I know for quite some time, folks have been putting in projects and not including a load estimate. That's a big whiff on everybody's part, because this is your opportunity to estimate that load, whether you use the BMP calculator that DEP puts out, you have your own internal methodology, you want to use a calculator tool that we provide through the action plan database. Please, if your project has a load reduction, do that work for us, because that's really what that database is all about.
Yeah, and the only thing to add, take a look at the 2022 reasonable assurance update plan. Look at tables 7, 8, and 9. In particular, tables 8 and 9 would be sort of those ongoing projects and the future planned projects from the last RA cycle. Just make sure that those are still relevant. And those are the things that Maya said we're going to carry forward into this RA update as sort of the ongoing list of activities of the jurisdictions.
Yeah, and sort of what I've tried to like set up and sort of in terms of expectations for the reasonable assurance plan update. I think we're going to spend a lot more time working with you all, you know, on those tables that Ed is referring to make sure you're all very comfortable with the information that's being presented in those tables, because the stakes are a little bit higher based on what we're pitching to the department and EPA. We really want to make sure that that's tight. So that those will be meeting agenda items where we're sort of working through. So if you wait too long to get us those data, we're going to be sort of convening those meetings around, you know, bad data and not enough information. So that's why we're kind of focused on this path.
Any other comments or questions? Anything from anybody online?
Put it in the chat.
I have 3 potential meeting dates. I don't know if it makes a little difference to anybody about which ones, which date. I haven't talked to the RPC to see if the room is available yet. It's possible that might be a meeting that we just do 100% virtual. Because like I said, if we're reducing sort of the meeting cadence, if the only thing we have to discuss is the department and EPA's response to the decision memo, maybe it makes sense to do it virtually. So your feedback on whether you'd like it in person or virtual, and if you have a preference from the April 24th to 29th or May 6th, I'll do my best. You got hard nose? We got a hard no on April 29th.
No, I can't do that.
Oh, you can. The other ones are hard nose.
Oh, I had the opposite. The county employee recognition thing on the 29th.
Oh, it is?
Mm-hmm. So Michelle can't do this.
May 6th over there.
May 6th works for some. Okay. So it's going to be hard one way or the other. And last time we were here, you guys said you prefer mornings to afternoon. Gotcha. Okay. I will do my best. Anything else?
No, I mean, just one last thought. I know you mentioned some of the work maybe post RA cycle. I know it might be helpful in the next meeting to hear what some of those thornier, how we might lay these out in the next 5 years.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I mean, right now, I think a lot of it, we've talked about how the allocations are tied and that to that geographic discretization process. and how we know that the boundaries have changed. We've talked about this issue, how in Manatee County in particular, they've been concerned about connections to their reclaimed. So it's more sort of how growth has changed in the region and how that connects to the allocations and whether or not that's something that we actually have interest in. It's sort of this tension between the best science available and how that might influence like some of the regulatory frameworks that we're operating in. So
Yeah, just being a bit selfish, I've lived in South County, Hillsborough for 15 years now. I do miss some lines. I like my South County people.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of change down there is just unbelievable. So I think a lot of the underlying assumptions, just thinking for that area, something, I know we've been hyper focused and for very good reason on Old Tampa Bay. There's been so much change in that area.
Yeah.
Basin, it's important to get that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if nothing else, thank you for everybody's time and have a good rest of your day. During the meeting.